Hi there. In today's video, we're going to look at the legacy Orthanc user interface, and we're going to compare it to the Orthanc Explorer 2, which we already have a video of on this channel. So if you haven't seen it, it is available. I'll put a link in this particular video. Now, how do you get to the Legacy Explorer? Well, what happens is that in most cases, you would start with Orthanc Explorer 2. That's the interface that's usually well known and familiar to most. Now, what's happening here is that this is what truly kind of resembles a work list that one may see on PACS, although there's some pretty significant caveats here. This is more of a study list that doesn't really resemble a true work list because there's not really much logic in here, but nonetheless, at least it looks similar and it's kind of easier to navigate. Now, if I click over on this legacy UI button, that takes me over to what we are calling the legacy user interface, right? Exactly as the name suggests, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. This legacy user interface, you don't have to specifically install it. It's part of Orthanc. Some people don't know that it exists, but it's there. It's the legacy one. It's the original one. It's got some limitations, so you can come across this. So probably important to know what it can or can't do. Now, going back and forth between the two, so you have an action button out here. Open Orthanc Explorer 2. You click on that. You're back to the new one, right? And then, of course, we already discussed that as you click on this particular button, you are then returned to the legacy interface. Now, what you see out here, and that's one of the main differentiators, is if we go back to the Explorer 2, the one thing to note about this list is that this is study-based, right? Which is also one of the things that some may find different from, how your PACS specifically is organized, maybe not, right? So, but if we go over to Legacy UI, you can actually define well, first of all, you can search for a specific study. That's a given, fair enough. But you also can look at all patients and all studies. So those are the two selections. So that means that you can start at the patient level, which obviously is at the top of the food chain. And I can go back by clicking lookup up top here. I can click on all studies. And that is actually the same thing as what we saw on the Orthanc Explorer 2, just the look and feel is a bit different. Now, in here, of course, important to remember the hierarchy of DICOM. We remember that at the top of the food chain, so to speak, we have patients, and patients go over to hospitals, clinics, whatever, and get studies done. Studies contain series, and series contain images, which we refer to in DICOM as instances. All right, so out here, I can select, for example, all patients, right? And then these are all the patients that exist on my test system out here. I can then click on any given patient. And at this point, and you can see up top here, we have the path. So demo server over to patient level. So the patient is Batman. And then this patient has two studies, right? Two studies that belong to patient Batman. At any given level, and you'll see in a second that I can click on a study, and then we go a level further. So now we're into study, right? So again, we have our patient banner, we have our study banner. We'll talk about these buttons in a second, but then over to the right, you now have the selector of different series that you can jump to, right? Then you can select the series that you want. And now we're at the series level, as you can see, as evidenced at the top here. The next step is, of course, the images themselves, or as we refer to them in DICOM, are instances, right? So then I can click on any given instance, and that is where I get to see the entirety of the DICOM header as it relates to that specific image or that specific instance, which makes sense. Now, I can always come back to any level. All of these are clickable, so I can come back all the way to the patient level, and you can see that we've already seen this screen. Now, what do we have out here? And, again, we need to appreciate the differences, and we need to appreciate some of the limitations that exist in the legacy interface. So first of all, there's all these action buttons that you can find on the left-hand side. They slightly differ between different levels, and one of the issues actually that existed, to my understanding, something that's prompted even the creation of Orthanc Explorer 2, is the fact that it's a bit of a crazy mix as far as functionality is concerned. Some of it can be used by clinical people, but not that much. Some of it can be used by admins, things like deleting, sending to a remote modality. And some of it is more useful for developers. But not much differentiation here, if you will. So for example, if I click on any given study out here, right, you can see that my buttons change slightly, not much. I've got a few different viewers now, whatever's integrated that I can open, right? So for example, if I wanted to launch OHIP viewer, no problem. And I do have different components, right? So I can select basic viewer, for example, and it'll launch OHIP viewer, which a lot of people incidentally do nowadays. This is obviously, just some kind of DICOM wrapped image. So well, we obviously can bring in an actual radiological image, something like this, and then look through this. That's no problem at all. Now, all right, that part's fine. That's no issues here. What else do we have? Well, we can delete the study. Sure, fair enough. We can send to a different DICOM modality as long as this is configured. We can anonymize the study. Now, this is interesting. I'll show you on a different patient because this one's already been modified. So let's go back to lookup. I'm just going to click at the top here. We're going to go back to lookup. We're going to go to all patients and select Donald Duck as an example. And then we're going to select, so Donald Duck is the patient. We're going to select the study that we have for Donald Duck. And now I'm able to anonymize this, right? So I can anonymize this study. And what's going to happen here is Orthanc, under this specific user interface, is going to automatically apply the anonymization profile, but the problem is going to call it whatever it decides to. So it's going to call it anonymized 6. Well, that's a feature that we don't actually have in Orthanc Explorer 2. So if I go to all patients, right, there's my anonymized 6 patient, the one I just anonymized. If I click before anonymization, it actually takes me back to that original study, which, you can find some use cases for this. So, a couple of things that you could do here. But again, I just want to stress the fact that it's an older interface. So you've got a couple of things on here that a regular clinical person um, may find confusing. It's very much so DICOM oriented, which is great for us. But again, if you're setting this up for your doctors, this may not be the most user friendly interface. As far as navigating this and things that you can do, again, I've said that buttons at the top allow you to get to different places. So the upload button, that's actually very similar to what you have, at least in functionality, with what you have in Orthanc Explorer 2. This is where you can drag and drop, but your DICOM files, right? That's very important. DICOM files if you want to add something from here. You can click on lookup to go back. And then you have the query retrieve. Sounds pretty neat. So obviously to query retrieve something, you need another DICOM system that's connected to it. We discussed this in the previous video as to how to connect it. There's a video on the configuration, this basic configuration of Orthanc. Put it in the description. I'll put a link here so you can decide and take a look at this if you need to. But I have something configured here already. It's called Orthanc 1, so just another instance of Orthanc. And they're on the same network, supposed to be anyways. Let's try to do a C echo between the two, and the C echo has succeeded. If any of you are not sure what a C echo is, it's one of the DICOM services, also known as DICOM ping, that allows two DICOM devices to basically try and see if they're not only on the same network, which is similar to what you would see with the regular ping utility, but rather it allows you to see whether the two devices can communicate in DICOM. So that's kind of a big deal. Now, I just want to see what's on that remote device. So ultimately, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on search studies out here. And by doing that, you can see that now I'm doing a DICOM query retrieve to my configured destination. And these are the studies. Now, this is an important point here, not patients, but studies that exist on that remote platform. Now, if I click on any one given study, then you would have different series that exist within a study. Again, that's that hierarchy that comes in. That's very important, right? Patient, study, series, image, or instance. And then what I would do is I would click on any given series, and that is what I would be able to retrieve back into my system. So I would click on retrieve. I would wait a little bit while that retrieval actually happens, and as long as everything's good, we would get that study and that patient available to us within our system as well. If it didn't work, you would have gotten an error code. So we can do a lookup. Now remember, we pulled it into our into our system. So now I can go to all patients and I should be able to see that new patient, which I do right here. So it's Doe Archibald, which is the patient that we've got. So this is the primary overview of what you would see out here. There's the jobs one, which just shows you everything that's been done. It's useful for, well, it's actually useful for a lot of personas, both the admins and the developers. But as you can see, that's part of the complication here, is that a lot of these things, they're really aimed at developers, at admins, not so much the clinical folks. And another important thing to remember is that the real power of Orthanc is not actually neither the legacy interface, not the Orthanc 2 interface. They're there. It's okay. It's not a problem. The real power of this platform is the RESTful API and the ability to convey information via that route. Now, for clinical folks, what they usually end up doing, and I'll just do a really quick demo of this, is they'll usually utilize something like the OHIP viewer, although it's different options available, right? So you can click on this, and what you're going to see out here, you can see all the studies that we have in a work list type organization. Again, this is a list of studies, not really a work list, but nonetheless. And out here, this is where you can actually go directly to the viewer and obviously, utilize, OHIP rather, viewer to its full potential, which we'll do a separate video on this. Let me know in the comments if this is something you would like. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and until next time.